My mom looked me dead in the eye at Grandma's funeral and said she left me nothing. 2 days later, she was already pushing to sell Grandma's house like it was on fire. Then I found a handwritten clue taped under a drawer. It led to a hidden safe my mom swore did not exist. Inside were a will, a key, and one sentence that made my stomach drop. "If you are reading this," she lied, "my name is Aurora Waverly." And the first thing I noticed when I stepped out of my rental car in Pine Hollow, Tennessee, was that the air still smelled exactly the way I remembered it. It smelled like damp earth, pine needles, and the kind of suffocating humidity that makes your clothes stick to your skin within seconds. I was 36 years old, standing in the gravel driveway of the church where I had been baptized, confirmed, and now was about to bury the only person in this town who had ever truly loved me. Grandma Eleanor, or Ellie as she insisted everyone call her, was gone. The funeral service itself was a blur of black fabric and murmured condolences that felt more like social obligations than genuine grief. I sat in the front pew, spine rigid, keeping a calculated distance from the rest of the Waverly clan. To my left sat my brother, Mason, looking at his shoes as if the secrets of the universe were scrawled in the dust on the leather. Next to him was my sister, Brianna, checking her reflection in the back of a spoon she had pulled from her purse, making sure her waterproof mascara was holding up. And then there was Darlene, my mother. She was center stage, of course. She stood by the casket, accepting hugs with the grace of a grieving saint, dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief I had never seen her use before. She played the part perfectly. The devoted daughter, the heartbroken matriarch. It was only when the service ended and we moved toward the hearse that the mask slipped. Just for a second. Just for me. Darlene approached me as the crowd began to disperse toward their cars. She opened her arms, and to the onlookers, it looked like a mother comforting her grieving child. She pulled me into an embrace that was less of a hug and more of a restraint. Her fingers dug into the muscle of my shoulder, sharp and punishing. She leaned in close, her perfume gardenias and something metallic filling my nose. "Don't hope for anything," she whispered. Her voice was low, a hiss of static right against my ear. "I handled it. She left you nothing." I froze. My breath hitched in my throat. But Darlene was already pulling back. She held me at arm's length, her face shifting instantly back into a mask of tragic sorrow as a neighbor walked past. "Oh, Aurora," she said loudly, her voice trembling with theatrical emotion. "We have to be strong. For Mama." I looked at her, searching for a trace of a joke, a misunderstanding, anything, but her eyes were hard, flat stones. She meant it. She had dropped the bomb and walked away before the smoke could even clear. The wake was held at Grandma Ellie's house, a sprawling Victorian on the edge of town that used to feel like a sanctuary. Now, as I walked through the front door, it felt like a staging ground. The house was wrong. That was the first thought that struck me as I navigated the crowded hallway. It was too clean. Not just tidy, but sterile. The clutter of a life lived for 80 years had been surgically removed. I walked into the living room and looked at the mantel. The silver frames that used to hold photos of my high school graduation, my first apartment, the awkward selfies Grandma and I took when she visited me in Chicago, they were gone. In their place were photos of Brianna's wedding and Mason's children. It was a subtle rewriting of history. If you looked at this room now, you would think I had never existed. I moved to the kitchen, needing a glass of water to wash down the bile rising in my throat. Brianna was there, leaning against the counter, sipping a glass of iced tea. She looked me up and down, her gaze lingering on my simple black suit. "You look tired, Aurora," she said. It wasn't a question. "It was a long flight," I said, opening a cabinet to find a glass. The cabinet was half empty. The mismatched mugs Grandma loved were gone, replaced by a generic white set I didn't recognize. "Where is everything? Where are Grandma's things?" Brianna shrugged, a gesture of practiced indifference. "Mom started clearing things out a few days ago. No point in dragging it out. It is better to just get it done." A few days ago, I turned to look at her. Grandma died 3 days ago. You mean Mom started packing while the body was still warm? Brianna let out a short, sharp laugh. Don't be dramatic. It is what Grandma wanted. Order. Mom is just handling the burden so we don't have to. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial purr. Look, I know you were expecting something, but honestly, Aurora, consider this a lesson in growing up. You have been gone for years. You cannot expect a payout just for showing up to the funeral. I set the glass down on the counter hard enough that water sloshed over the rim. I didn't come for a payout. Brianna, I came to bury my grandmother. Sure, she said, turning away. Whatever helps you sleep. I walked out of the kitchen, my hands shaking. I found Mason in the den, staring blankly at the television which was turned off. Mason, I said. He jumped, looking guilty. Hey, Rory. Did you see the house? I asked, gesturing to the empty shelves around us. Did you see what they did? They stripped it. Mason, it is like she never lived here. Mason rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous tic he had had since we were kids. Mom just wanted to get a head start. You know how she is. She gets anxious if things aren't organized. This isn't organized, I said. This is erasure. Where are the papers? Where is the will? Mason looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Mom has it handled. Just don't cause a scene. Okay, not today. I wanted to scream at him, to shake him until he grew a spine, but I knew it was useless. Mason had spent 40 years making himself small to avoid Darlene's wrath. He wasn't going to start fighting now. I found Darlene in the dining room, holding court with a stack of papers on the polished mahogany table. She waved me over, a pen already in her hand. Aurora, good, you are here, she said, her voice brisk and businesslike. We need to get this sorted out before you fly back to wherever it is you are living now. She slid a document toward me. It was a dense block of legal text, the edges curling slightly in the humidity. What is this? I asked, not reaching for the pen. Just standard consent forms, Darlene said, her eyes scanning the room to see who was watching. It gives me authority to manage the immediate expenses, funeral costs, utility bills, securing the property. You know how expensive probate can be if we drag our feet. We need to sell the house quickly to cover the debts. Debts? I frowned. Grandma didn't have debts. She owned this house outright since 1998. Things change. Aurora, Darlene snapped, her patience thinning. End-of-life care is expensive. The taxes are overdue. Just sign it so we can move on and respect Mama's wishes. I looked down at the paper. The legal jargon swam before my eyes. But one phrase caught my attention, waive all rights to contest. I pulled my hand back. I am not signing this. The room went quiet. The chatter of the wake died down as heads turned toward us. Darlene's smile froze, her lips stretching thin over her teeth. Excuse me. I said I am not signing it. I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. Not until I read it, not until I see the will. Darlene let out a sigh that sounded like a tire deflating. She looked around the room, offering a sympathetic shrug to the neighbors, as if to say, see what I have to deal with, Aurora, she said, her voice dropping into that dangerous, disappointed register. Don't make this difficult. Everyone else has signed. Mason signed. Brianna signed. Why do you always have to be the problem? I am not being the problem, I said. I am being careful. Grandma told me she had things in order. I want to see the documents. Darlene leaned in, her voice a low growl. She told you a lot of things. Aurora, she was old. She was confused. She left you nothing because she knew you would just waste it. Now sign the paper. I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the fear behind the aggression. I saw the desperation in the way her hand hovered over the paper, ready to snatch it back if I read too much. No, I said. I turned and walked out of the house. I could feel her eyes boring into my back, hot and hateful, but I didn't stop. I walked straight to my rental car, got in, and drove until the house was just a speck in the rearview mirror. I checked into a cheap motel on the highway, the kind with flickering neon signs and carpets that smelled of stale smoke. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the blank television screen, listening to the trucks rumble past outside. I felt hollowed out. It wasn't the money. I had a job. I had savings. I didn't need Grandma's money to survive. But the cruelty of it, the way Darlene had delivered the news, the way they had erased me from the house, it felt like losing Grandma all over again. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, startling me. The screen lit up with a local number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then picked it up. "Hello, Aurora." The voice was crackly, thin with age. "Is that you, honey? Mrs. Calder?" I asked, recognizing the voice of Grandma's next-door neighbor. She had lived beside Grandma for 30 years. "I am so sorry I didn't get to say hello at the service. Everything was just—" "Hush now. I know," Mrs. Calder said. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I can't talk long. I saw you leave. I saw Darlene chasing after you with those papers." "Yeah," I said, rubbing my temples. "She wants me to sign away my rights." "Listen to me," Mrs. Calder said, her tone suddenly sharp and lucid. "Your grandmother, she worried about this. She told me, about a month ago, when her heart started acting up again, she said to me, 'Betty, if anything happens to me, and if Darlene tells Aurora she got nothing, you tell that girl to check for herself.'" My grip on the phone tightened. "Check what? Check where?" "She mentioned a safe," Mrs. Calder said. "She said she put something away. She said, 'Darlene thinks she is smart, but I know where she hides her lies. She told me to tell you to look in the sewing room.' She said, 'Tell her to look where the thread doesn't match.'" "The sewing room," I repeated. "Mrs. Calder, Darlene has gutted the house. She has cleared everything out." "She cleared out what she could see," Mrs. Calder said. "But Ellie was clever. You go back there. Aurora, you go back and you look." The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the silence of the motel room pressing in on me. I looked at the clock. It was nearly midnight. Darlene and Brianna would be asleep, or at least gone from the main house. Mason was staying at his own place across town. The house would be empty. I didn't let myself think about the legality of it. I didn't think about trespassing or breaking and entering. I just grabbed my keys and went out the door. The drive back was a blur. I parked the car a block away, under the shadow of an old oak tree, and walked the rest of the way. The house loomed in the darkness, a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky. I walked around to the back door, the one that led into the mudroom. I reached under the third flower pot to the left, a hiding spot Grandma and I had used for 20 years. The spare key was there. Cold and heavy in my hand, I let myself in. The house was silent, smelling of lemon cleaner and old wood. I didn't turn on the lights. I used the flashlight on my phone, keeping the beam low. I moved through the kitchen, down the hallway, past the empty rectangles on the walls where the photos used to be. I stopped in front of the sewing room door. This had been Grandma's sanctuary. It was where she taught me to hem a skirt, where we sat for hours while she told me stories about her youth. I pushed the door open. The room had been tossed. The fabric stash was gone. The old Singer sewing machine was still there, too heavy to move easily, but the drawers of the desk had been pulled out and left hanging open. I swept the flashlight beam across the room. "Look where the thread doesn't match." I didn't know what that meant. I looked at the walls. They were covered in floral wallpaper that had been there since the 80s. I looked at the floorboards. Nothing. Then I moved the heavy sewing cabinet. It scraped loudly against the floor, the sound like a gunshot in the quiet house. I froze, waiting for a noise from upstairs. But silence returned. I shined the light behind the cabinet. Where the wall had been hidden for years, there was a scratch. It wasn't an old scratch. It was a fresh gouge in the plaster, white and stark against the yellowed paint. It looked like someone had tried to pry something loose. Or perhaps someone had hurriedly shoved the heavy furniture back into place to cover something up. I knelt down, running my fingers over the scratch. The plaster dust came away on my skin. It was fresh, less than 48 hours old. I pressed my ear against the wall and tapped. Thud. Solid. I moved my hand 6 inches to the right and tapped again. Tink. Hollow. Or rather, metallic. There was something behind the wall. I sat back on my heels, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Mrs. Calder was right. Darlene had missed something. Or worse, she had found something she couldn't open. So she had hidden it behind the heaviest piece of furniture in the room, hoping I would never look. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the scratch, the dust, and the position of the cabinet. Then I stood up. My mother had told me I had nothing. She had told me to sign my name and walk away. I looked at the wall one last time. "You are wrong, Darlene," I whispered to the empty room. "I am just getting started." The adrenaline from breaking into my own grandmother's house had faded, leaving behind a cold, hollow ache that settled deep in my bones. I sat at the small, wobbly desk in my motel room, the neon light from the sign outside buzzing and casting intermittent red stripes across the peeling wallpaper. It was 2 a.m. My hands were still dirty with the dust from behind the sewing cabinet, but I could not bring myself to wash them yet. That dust felt like the only real thing left of the woman who had raised me in all the ways that mattered. I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the hard plastic chair. In the silence, the ghost of my family dynamic rose up to haunt me, clearer than it had been in years. To the outside world, the Waverly family was a tight-knit unit of Southern respectability. Darlene made sure of that. We were the family in the front pew at Easter, the family with the perfectly manicured lawn, the family that volunteered at the soup kitchen on Thanksgiving, but only for exactly 1 hour, just long enough to be seen by the right people. But inside that house, love was not a feeling. It was a currency, and Darlene was the banker. My mother operated on a system of conditional kindness that was as precise as a mathematical equation. If you did exactly what she wanted, when she wanted, and how she wanted, you were rewarded. You got the invite to Sunday dinner. You got the help with the down payment. You got the warmth of her approval, which was addictive precisely because it was so rare. But the moment you stepped out of line, the moment you chose a state college instead of the one she picked, or dated a man she thought was beneath us, or simply expressed an opinion that contradicted hers, the account was frozen. You were cut off. You were invisible. I had learned this the hard way when I was 19. I wanted to study logistics and supply chain management. Darlene wanted me to marry a lawyer and join the junior league. When I packed my bags for Chicago, she told me I was making a mistake I would pay for the rest of my life. She did not yell. Darlene never yelled. She just looked at me with those cool, disappointed eyes and said I was on my own. And she meant it. For 5 years. I did not exist to her. Brianna, on the other hand, had mastered the art of the transaction. My older sister was not inherently bad. At least, not at first. She was just pragmatic. She saw the game board and she played to win. She stayed close to home. She married the man Darlene approved of, a bland, wealthy real estate developer who nodded at all the right times. In exchange, Brianna got the safety net. When her first house needed a new roof, Darlene wrote the check. When Brianna wanted to start a boutique that inevitably failed 6 months later, Darlene covered the losses and spun it as a learning experience to the neighbors. Brianna traded her autonomy for comfort, and over the years, that comfort had hardened into a sense of entitlement. She stood by Mom not out of loyalty, but out of necessity. She was a vine that had forgotten how to stand without the trellis. And then there was Mason, my big brother, the one who used to sneak me candy bars when I was sent to my room without dinner. Mason was the tragedy of the bunch. He was a good man who had been slowly ground down into a fine powder by 2 dominant women. He hated the conflict. He hated the manipulation, but he hated the idea of being the target even more. So he kept his head down, agreed with everyone, and let me take the hits. His silence at the funeral, his refusal to look me in the eye when I asked about the house that hurt more than Brianna's snideness. Brianna was protecting her interests. Mason was just protecting his peace, even if the cost was my dignity. Grandma Ellie had been the only one who saw through it. She was the only person in my life who did not keep a ledger. I remembered a humid afternoon 3 years ago. I had come back to Pine Hollow for a rare visit, mostly to see her. We were sitting on her back porch, shelling peas into a metal bowl. The rhythmic snap-pop of the pods was the only sound for a long time. "You are good, Aurora," Grandma had said suddenly, her hands never stopping their work. "I am okay, Grandma," I had replied, thinking she was asking about my job. "No," she said, looking up. Her eyes were sharp, blue and unclouded by the dementia Darlene loved to hint at. "I mean, you are good on your own. You built a life. You pay your own bills. You do not need anyone's permission to buy a gallon of milk." I laughed. "I guess not." "That scares them," she said. She did not say names, but we both knew who she meant. "Darlene likes people who need her. It makes her feel safe. You do not need her. That makes you dangerous." She paused, dropping a handful of peas into the bowl. "Listen to me, honey. Darlene is going to try to punish you for that when I'm gone." "Grandma, don't talk like that," I said, uncomfortable. "I am old, not blind," she snapped gently. "She is going to try to cut you out. She thinks if she takes away the things I leave you, she can make you small again. She thinks she can starve you back into the fold." She reached out and gripped my wrist, her fingers strong and calloused. "If one day you hear her say that I left you nothing, if she looks you in the eye and tells you that you have been forgotten, do not believe it. Do not let her rewrite my love for you." I had forgotten that conversation until the moment Darlene hugged me by the hearse. Now, sitting in the motel room, the memory replayed in high definition. She left you nothing. It wasn't just a statement of fact, it was a weapon. Darlene had delivered that line with a precision that felt rehearsed. The way she had gathered the family support, the way she had pre-sold the narrative of me being the distant daughter, the way the house was cleared out so quickly it was a military operation. She knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted me to react emotionally. She wanted me to scream at the funeral, to make a scene, to look like the greedy, unstable daughter she had painted me to be. If I fought her with anger, I lost. If I fought her with tears, I lost. She was counting on me being the 19-year-old girl who ran away to Chicago in a fit of tears. But I was not 19 anymore. I stood up and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain to look at the empty parking lot. I worked for Northbridge Operations Group. We did not sell products. We sold solutions to logistical nightmares. I spent my days managing supply chains for disaster relief zones and coordinating complex international shipping routes. My job was to look at a chaotic, broken situation, find the leverage points, and apply pressure until the system worked. I dealt with customs officials who wanted bribes and union leaders who wanted to shut down ports. I did not get intimidated by loud voices or closed doors. Darlene thought she was dealing with a daughter. She did not realize she was dealing with a project manager. My finances were solid. I had a 401k. I had investments. I did not need Grandma's money to pay my rent. This gave me an advantage Darlene did not understand. She thought money was the leash. She thought that by withholding the inheritance, she was holding the food bowl above a starving dog. But I was not starving. I was just grieving, and she had made the mistake of turning my grief into a cold, hard resolve. I was hurt. God, I was hurt. The realization that my mother would rob me not just of money, but of the final acknowledgement of my grandmother's love was a jagged pill to swallow. It made my chest tight and my eyes burn. I wanted to call her and ask why. I wanted to ask Mason how he could stand there and watch it happen. But I knew the answers would only be gaslighting and deflection. Emotion was a liability right now. I needed to turn it off. I needed to treat this like a work contract that had gone sideways. I went back to the desk and grabbed the notepad provided by the motel. It had a stain on the corner and the logo was faded, but it would do. I uncapped a pen and stared at the blank white paper. Grandma had left a trail, the scratch on the wall, the hollow sound behind the cabinet, Mrs. Calder's phone call. It was a puzzle, and Grandma knew I was the only one with the patience to solve it. She had bet on me. She had hidden her true will because she knew Darlene would burn it. That thought alone gave me a surge of strength. Grandma had anticipated this war, and she had armed me. I wrote down the header, Operation Waverly Estate, underneath. I began to list my objectives. I wrote them in block letters, pressing down hard enough that the pen indented the page. Objective 1, secure the asset. I needed to get into that safe. I had the location, but I did not have the combination, and the keypad was likely locked out if Darlene had been tampering with it. I needed legal access. I could not break in again. That would give Darlene ammunition to have me arrested. I needed a court order. I needed a lawyer who wasn't in Darlene's pocket. Objective 2. Freeze the flow. Darlene was moving fast. She was already trying to sell the house. I recalled her mentioning debts and taxes, which sounded like a fabrication to justify a quick cash sale. If she sold the house to a third party, the safe and everything in it would be gone. I had to stop the sale. I had to jam the gears of her machine. That meant contesting her executorship immediately. I needed to file an injunction. I had to stop the money from moving. Objective 3. Protect the line. This was the most important one. Darlene wasn't just trying to take the money. She was trying to erase my lineage. She wanted to establish a legal precedent that I was disinherited. If I let this slide, if I walked away, I was accepting her version of history. I was accepting that Grandma didn't love me. I wrote this point down with a shaky hand. Ensure the true distribution is honored. Do not let her win. I looked at the list. It was short, brutal, and devoid of sentiment. It was exactly what I needed. I tore the page off the pad and folded it into my pocket. I checked the time again. It was almost 3 a.m. I needed sleep. Even if it was just for a few hours, tomorrow was going to be a war. I laid down on the lumpy mattress, staring up at the water stain on the ceiling that looked vaguely like a map of Tennessee. I thought about Mason, sleeping in his nice house, probably telling himself he had no choice. I thought about Brianna, probably dreaming of how she would spend her cut of the estate. And I thought about Darlene, confident in her victory, sleeping the sleep of the self-righteous. They thought I was the outcast. They thought I was the weak link because I had left. You have no idea, I whispered to the dark room. I closed my eyes, visualizing the scratch on the wall behind the sewing cabinet. That scratch was my lifeline. It was the only proof I had that I wasn't crazy. Darlene had tried to smooth over the wall, to hide her crime, but she had been sloppy. Arrogance always made people sloppy. Tomorrow, I would stop being Aurora the daughter. Tomorrow, I would be Aurora the plaintiff. I would find a lawyer. I would file the motions, and I would rip the facade off this family, layer by layer, until everyone saw exactly what was rotting underneath. I pulled the blanket up to my chin. The smell of the motel soap was harsh, but it was better than the smell of Darlene's metallic perfume. I let the anger simmer down into a low, steady burn, a fuel that would get me through the morning. Grandma had left me a job to do, and unlike my mother, I never left a job unfinished. The morning fog still clung to the asphalt of the driveway when I pulled my rental car up to the curb. Parking a safe distance away from the house. It was 7 a.m. I knew Darlene's routine. She would be at the local bakery picking up cinnamon rolls for the relatives she was hosting, playing the part of the grieving hostess to perfection. That gave me a window of maybe 45 minutes. I walked up the path, my shoes crunching softly on the wet gravel. I had told myself this was a reconnaissance mission, a way to gather keepsakes before they were thrown into a dumpster. But my heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I was not here for porcelain figurines. I was here for the truth. As I reached the porch, a soft hiss came from the rhododendron bushes to my left. Aurora! I froze, my hand hovering over the doorbell. I turned slowly. Mrs. Calder was kneeling in her garden bed, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and oversized gardening gloves, pretending to prune a rosebush that had clearly already been pruned. She did not look at me. She kept her eyes on the flowers, snipping at the air. Mrs. Calder, I whispered. Don't look at me, honey, she murmured, her voice low and urgent. Just come here and take the gardening shears. Pretend you are helping me." I stepped off the porch and crouched beside her. The smell of wet earth and fertilizer was overwhelming. Mrs. Calder reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a folded, yellowed piece of paper. It looked like it had been torn from the flyleaf of an old hardback. "She put this in her cookbook," Mrs. Calder said, sliding the paper into my hand along with the shears. "The one she used for Sunday roast. She told me, if Darlene starts acting like a vulture, make sure Aurora checks the recipe for roast beef." I unfolded the paper. In Grandma's shaky but distinct cursive, there was a string of numbers 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42, and a single line of instruction, sewing room, third board. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick. "Go," she said, finally looking up. Her eyes were fearful. "I saw Darlene's car turn down Main Street. You do not have much time." I slipped the paper into my bra and stood up, moving quickly to the front door. I used the spare key I had kept from the night before. The house was silent, but it felt different in the daylight. The emptiness was more pronounced. The dust motes dancing in the shafts of light looked like suspended ghosts. I went straight to the sewing room. The heavy oak cabinet was exactly where I had left it, pushed back against the wall to cover the scratch I had found. I shoved it aside again, the wood screeching in protest. I winced, waiting for a reaction from the house, but silence answered me. I looked at the wall. The scratch was there, stark and white, but now, with the sunlight filtering through the sheer curtains, I saw what I had missed in the dark. The wainscoting, the decorative wooden paneling that ran along the lower half of the wall, had a seam that looked slightly uneven. Third board, I counted from the doorframe. 1, 2, 3. I ran my fingers along the edge of the third wooden panel. It was loose, not falling off loose, but there was a subtle give, a slight wobble that shouldn't be there in a house built this sturdily. I pulled a small multi-tool from my pocket, something I always carried for work, and wedged the flathead screwdriver into the seam. With a sharp crack, the board popped free. It was not just a piece of wood. It was a false front, held in place by magnetic latches. Behind it, the plaster had been cut away to reveal a hollow space between the studs, and inside that space was a metal plate. I shined my phone's flashlight into the cavity. The metal plate was gray steel, about 10 inches square, but what made my breath catch was the hardware. The screws holding the plate in place were shiny. They were new. The heads were stripped, the metal jagged and bright, as if someone had used the wrong size screwdriver and forced them in a hurry. Someone had been here. Recently, I worked quickly, unscrewing the plate. My hands were shaking, making the tool slip twice, gouging the drywall. When the last screw came free, the plate fell forward with a heavy clank. Behind it sat a small, digital wall safe. It was a terrifyingly modern thing for Grandma to have, contrasting sharply with the Victorian bones of the house. The keypad was dark. I pressed the on button. A red light flashed rapidly. Beep, beep, beep. The small LED screen lit up with 2 words that made my stomach drop: system lockout. I stared at it, the red light pulsing like a warning beacon. This wasn't a malfunction. This was a security feature. Someone had tried to open this safe. They had punched in a code, likely birthdays, anniversaries, social security numbers, and they had gotten it wrong. They had guessed so many times that the system had shut down completely to prevent tampering. Darlene. It had to be. That explained the frantic cleaning, the rush to sell the house. She knew the safe was here. She had found the panel, maybe even removed the board, but she could not get in. So she was selling the house to bury the evidence, hoping the new owners would simply drywall over it during a renovation. I took a picture of the lockout screen. I took a picture of the stripped screws. I took a video, narrating the time and date, panning from the safe to the rest of the room to prove I was inside the house. "Okay," I whispered to myself. "Okay, you can't get in." But she couldn't either. I needed to find the backup key. Most of these digital safes came with a physical override key for exactly this situation. Grandma wouldn't have kept it in the safe. That would defeat the purpose. She would have hidden it somewhere accessible but innocuous. I looked around the room. It had been stripped of the obvious things, no jewelry boxes, no file folders, but the sewing machine, an antique singer, was still there. Darlene probably thought it was junk. I sat down at the machine. It had 3 small drawers on the right side. I pulled the top one open, empty. I pulled the middle one, empty. I pulled the bottom drawer. It was filled with a tangle of old bobbins, loose thread, and a tin of assorted buttons. I dumped the button tin out onto the desk. Hundreds of buttons, mother of pearl, plastic, wood scattered across the surface, and there, mixed in with the mundane debris of a seamstress's life, was a silver key. It didn't look like a safe key. It was too long, too flat. It looked more like a safety deposit box key. Attached to it was a faded paper tag, the ink barely legible. I squinted at the writing. Heartland Credit Union, Box 19. My mind raced. This wasn't the key to the wall safe. This was a key to something else, a second location. Grandma had a contingency plan for her contingency plan. I grabbed the key and the tag, shoving them deep into my pocket. I raised my phone to take one last photo of the empty button tin, to document where I found it. "You are digging again. Aurora." The voice came from the doorway. Sudden and sharp. I spun around, nearly dropping my phone. Darlene was standing there. She was wearing a black dress and holding a bakery box tied with white string. Her face was perfectly composed, but her eyes were darting around the room, taking in the moved cabinet, the tool in my hand, and the open drawer. "Mom," I said. I forced my voice to remain steady, though my pulse was roaring in my ears. "I didn't hear you come in." "Obviously," Darlene said. She stepped into the room, placing the bakery box on the cutting table with a deliberate slowness. "I thought we discussed this. The house is being catalogued. You are not supposed to be rummaging through things like a common thief." She walked toward me, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She stopped a few feet away, her gaze dropping to the open drawer and the scattered buttons. "I wasn't rummaging," I lied, my voice cool. "I came to get a few buttons, for a memento. Grandma taught me to sew on this machine. I wanted something to remember that." Darlene's eyes narrowed. She looked past me, toward the wall behind the cabinet. I had shifted my body to block her view of the removed board, but I knew I could not hide it forever. "Grandma hated mess," Darlene said, her voice dropping an octave. "She would be so disappointed to see you tearing her room apart. Why can't you just respect her memory? Aurora, why does everything have to be a struggle with you?" "I am respecting her memory," I said. "I am respecting the truth." Darlene flinched. It was microscopic, a tiny twitch at the corner of her mouth, but I saw it. She took a step closer, invading my personal space. I could smell the cinnamon from the box and the cold, metallic scent of her perfume. "There is no truth to find here," she hissed. "Just old junk and a house that needs to be sold to pay for the nursing home bills. You are looking for a pot of gold that doesn't exist, and frankly, it is embarrassing." She reached out and slammed the sewing drawer shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Go back to your hotel," she said. "Or better yet, go back to the city. There is nothing for you here." I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the tension in her jaw. I saw the way her hand was clenched into a fist at her side. She was terrified. She hadn't seen the wall safe yet, or at least, she hadn't seen that I had found it, but she suspected. She knew I was close. "I will go," I said. I picked up my phone and the multi-tool. "But Mom don't sell the sewing machine. Not yet." I walked past her, brushing her shoulder. She didn't move. She stood there, rigid as a statue, guarding the empty room. I didn't run to the car, though every instinct in my body screamed at me to flee. I walked. I got in, started the engine, and drove away with deliberate slowness. Only when I turned the corner and the house disappeared from the rearview mirror did I let out the breath I had been holding. I drove straight to a coffee shop 2 towns over, needing to be somewhere Darlene would not run into me. I found a booth in the back and pulled out my laptop. Heartland Credit Union. It was a small, regional bank. Grandma had banked there for 40 years. I logged into the bank's legacy portal. Years ago, before Grandma's eyes got bad, I had set up online access for her so she could check her pension deposits. I prayed the password hadn't been changed. I typed in the username, LEH1945, and the password, a combination of her favorite hymn and the year Grandpa died. The screen loaded. I navigated to the Services tab, looking for the safety deposit box records. Most banks didn't keep detailed digital logs of box access visible to the customer, but Heartland was old-fashioned. They had a visit history feature they had implemented for elderly clients, so families could track if their parents were actually going to the bank. I scrolled down to box 19. The log showed the last authorized entry. Date, September 24th, 2 days before Grandma died. User, Eleanor Hartley. That made sense. She had gone to put something in. But then I looked at the attempted access log, a security feature for when a key card is swiped, but the signature or biometrics don't match, or when someone requests access without proper clearance. There was an entry from 2 days ago, the day of the funeral. Date September 26th. Time, 1:15 p.m. Status denied. Note: executor requested access. Key missing. Access denied pending inventory check. I stared at the name of the person who had requested access. It wasn't just executor. The teller had manually entered a note in the comments field. Mrs. Darlene Waverly claimed key was lost. Advised to return with death certificate and court order. The air in the coffee shop seemed to drop 10 degrees. Darlene had gone to the bank immediately after the funeral. She knew about box 19. She had tried to bully her way in, claiming she lost the key I now had in my pocket. She had failed because Heartland's protocol was strict. But here was the kicker. The log showed another entry, just 20 minutes after Darlene's failed attempt. Date, September 26th. Time, 1:35 p.m. Status inquiry. Note: phone inquiry regarding box 19 contents. Caller identified as Patrice Holloway, attorney at law. Patrice Holloway, my mother's lawyer. They were hunting. They were desperate. Darlene had tried to get into the wall safe and failed. She had tried to get into the bank box and failed. She was systematically hitting every hiding spot Grandma had, and she was being blocked at every turn. But now she knew I was sniffing around. I closed the laptop, a cold smile touching my lips. Darlene had told me I had nothing. She had lied. I had the key she was looking for, and thanks to the digital trail she was too arrogant to cover. I had proof that she was trying to loot the estate before the body was even cold. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the only person I knew could help me now. "Hello," I said when the line connected. "I need to speak to a lawyer, and not just any lawyer. I need someone who isn't afraid of the Waverly family." The game had just changed. I wasn't just a daughter looking for answers anymore. I was the one holding the keys to the castle. I did not search for a lawyer on a billboard or a bus bench. Those lawyers were for car accidents and slip and falls. I needed a surgeon. I needed someone who understood that probate law was not just about dividing assets, but about dissecting the ugly, rotting anatomy of a dysfunctional family. I spent an hour cross-referencing state bar records with client reviews until I found Jonah Keene. His website was stark, minimalist, and devoid of smiling stock photos. The tagline simply read, "Estate litigation and asset recovery." I dialed his number from the quiet of my motel room. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. "Law office of Jonah Keene," a receptionist answered. "My name is Aurora Waverly," I said, my voice flat and professional. "I am calling to contest the executorship of the Eleanor Hartley estate in Pine Hollow. I have evidence of asset concealment, attempted unauthorized access to bank vaults, and what I believe is a fraudulent rush to liquidate real estate." There was a brief pause. "Hold for Mr. Keene." 30 seconds later, a deep, gravelly voice came on the line. "Ms. Waverly, you used some specific keywords with my receptionist. Asset concealment is a heavy accusation." "It is not an accusation if I have timestamps," I said. "My grandmother died 3 days ago. My mother, Darlene Waverly, claims there is no inheritance. She has already gutted the house and is pushing for an immediate cash sale. She attempted to access a safety deposit box yesterday and was denied. I have a video of a hidden wall safe she tried to pry open and failed. And I have the key to the bank box she is trying to breach. I heard the scratch of a pen on paper. You have the key. I found it hidden in a sewing drawer this morning. I said. Jonah Keene let out a short, cynical breath. Ms. Waverly, I have been doing this for 20 years. I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to listen closely. If you are told you got nothing, and the executor is rushing to sell the real estate like it is radioactive, it is usually because they are afraid of what you are about to find inside that house. A chill went down my spine. It was exactly what I had felt, but hearing it from a stranger gave it a terrifying validity. What do we do? I asked. We stop the bleeding, Jonah said. I need you to send me everything you have, the video of the safe, the photos of the scratches, the bank tag, any text messages where your mother mentions selling the house. I will draft an emergency petition to the probate court. We are going to ask for a temporary restraining order on the assets and a freeze on the estate's administration. Can we do that so quickly? Watch me, Jonah said. If she is moving this fast, we have to move faster. I will send you a retainer agreement. Sign it electronically. Once I file, your mother is going to scream. Be ready for that. I hung up and opened my laptop. I felt a grim satisfaction as I uploaded the files. The video of the red system lockout light on the safe, the photo of the Box 19 key, the screenshot of Darlene's text from yesterday signed the papers. Aurora. We need to list the house by Friday. I signed the retainer and wired the funds. It was a significant amount of money, but I looked at it as an investment in my own sanity. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone buzzed with an email notification from Jonah. Subject filed. Estate of Eleanor Hartley. Attached is the petition for a temporary restraining order and a motion to suspend powers of the putative executor. The court has granted an emergency hearing for Tuesday. Darlene has been served electronically and via courier. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was done. I had pulled the trigger. The response was immediate and nuclear. At 4 o'clock, an email landed in my inbox. It wasn't from Darlene. It was from Patrice Holloway, the family attorney my mother had been using for years. I knew Patrice. He was a slick, country club lawyer who specialized in making problems disappear for the wealthy residents of Pine Hollow. Subject urgent. Cease and desist. Estate liability. Ms. Waverly. We are in receipt of your frivolous motion regarding the estate of Eleanor Hartley. I am writing to advise you that your actions are causing an undue burden on the estate and your mother, who is grieving. By freezing the assets, you are preventing the necessary liquidation required to pay significant tax liabilities and end-of-life medical debts. Furthermore, your interference is creating legal fees that will deplete whatever small value remains in the estate. If you proceed with this obstructionist behavior, we will seek sanctions against you for the diminished value of the property. Darlene is trying to protect the family from bankruptcy. Your accusations of concealment are defamatory and baseless. Withdraw your motion by 5 o'clock today, and we may overlook this indiscretion. Regards, Patrice Holloway. Escrow. I read the email twice. My hands shook, not with fear, but with rage. Tax liabilities, bankruptcy, they were trying to scare me. They were using big words and threats of financial ruin to bully me back into submission. It was Darlene's voice coming through a lawyer's letterhead. I forwarded the email to Jonah with a single question: how do I respond? Jonah called me 5 minutes later. Do not respond, Jonah said, his voice calm and sharp as a razor. This is a standard intimidation tactic. It is called a rattle. They want to shake you to see if you drop. He mentioned tax liabilities, I said. What if there are debts I don't know about? If there are debts, they can be paid after we inventory the assets. Jonah said, if the house is worth $500,000 and the debt is $50,000, there is no reason to panic sell the house in 48 hours unless the house is actually worth a lot more, or there is something inside it they don't want you to see. So what is our move? We return fire, Jonah said. I am sending a response right now. We are not withdrawing anything. In fact, we are escalating. I am demanding formal discovery. Discovery. I am demanding the original hard copy of the will, not a photocopy, Jonah said. I am demanding the notary records for the day the will was signed. And most importantly, I am demanding 3 years of bank statements for every account Eleanor Hartley held. We are going to look at every single transfer, every withdrawal, every check written from the moment her health started to decline. 3 years, I repeated. That covers the entire time Mom was her primary caretaker. Exactly, Jonah said. If Darlene was siphoning money, we will see it, and Patrice knows that. If they are innocent, they will hand over the papers. If they fight the discovery request, well, then we know we hit a nerve. I hung up, feeling a strange mixture of terror and power. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just taking Darlene's word for it, I was forcing her to show her work. I spent the evening in the motel room, organizing my own records. I built a timeline. Grandma's hip surgery 2 years ago. The time she mentioned Darlene helping with the bills. The time Darlene bought a new car a week after Grandma was hospitalized. It was all circumstantial, but when I laid it out, the pattern was sickening. My phone rang at 8 o'clock. It was Mason. I stared at the screen. Mason never called me. We texted on birthdays, but a phone call meant something was wrong. Hello? I answered. Rory? Mason's voice was low, hushed. I could hear background noise, maybe the hum of a refrigerator. He sounded like he was hiding. Hey, Maze? Everything okay? She is really mad. Rory? Mason said. He sounded like a child again, scared of a scolding. She got served with some papers today. She was screaming at Patrice on the phone for an hour. She says you are ruining everything. She says you are going to make us lose the house and get us sued by the government. That is not true, Mason, I said gently. I am just asking to see the will. I am asking for transparency. If Mom has nothing to hide, why is she screaming? She says you are greedy, Mason whispered. She says you came back just to grab money. And what do you think? Mason, I asked. Do you think I am greedy? Or do you think it is weird that she cleared out Grandma's house in 2 days? Silence stretched over the line. I asked her, Mason said, his voice barely audible. After she got off the phone, I asked her if I could see the tax bills she was talking about. I said, Mom, if the debt is so bad, show me, and maybe I can help pay it so we don't have to sell the house so fast. What did she say? She told me to shut up, Mason said. The hurt in his voice was palpable. She told me I was too stupid to understand the finances and that I should just trust her. She wouldn't show me a single piece of paper. Rory, not one. She is lying. Mason, I said firmly. She is scared because I caught her trying to break into a safe she couldn't open. A safe? Mason sounded bewildered. What safe? Don't worry about it yet, I said. Just keep your head down, but don't sign anything else. Okay, please. For me, don't sign anything. I won't, Mason said. She is scaring me. Rory, she looks like a cornered animal. We hung up, and I felt a pang of sympathy for my brother. He was stuck in the blast zone, but his call confirmed everything Jonah had said. Darlene wasn't acting like a grieving daughter. She was acting like a CEO whose embezzlement scheme was about to be exposed. 10 minutes later, another email from Jonah arrived. Subject urgent. Real estate listing data. Aurora. My paralegal ran a search on the property address. I wanted to see if they had formally listed it yet. We found something interesting on the multiple listing service backend. The house wasn't listed for sale today. It was listed as an off-market pocket listing on September 19th. I stared at the date. September 19th. Grandma died on September 26th. Darlene had put the house on the market a full week before Grandma died. While Grandma was still breathing, while she was still lying in her hospital bed, Darlene was already negotiating the sale of the roof over her head. The debts and taxes were a lie. The rush to sell wasn't about funeral costs. It was premeditated. Darlene had planned this liquidation months ago. She was just waiting for Grandma's heart to stop beating so she could close the deal. This wasn't just greed. This was predation. I typed a reply to Jonah. Get the injunction. Burn it all down. I closed my laptop and walked to the window. The neon sign of the motel buzzed outside. I thought about my mother, sitting in that big, empty house, probably pacing the floors, wondering how I found out. She had spent my whole life making me feel small, making me feel like I was the mistake. But looking at that date, September 19th, I realized the truth. I wasn't the mistake. I was the reckoning. I slept soundly that night, for the first time since I arrived in Pine Hollow. I knew exactly where I stood. I was standing in the way, and I wasn't moving an inch. If war in the courtroom is fought with motions and affidavits, war in a small southern town is fought on Facebook. I woke up on Tuesday morning, the day of our emergency hearing, to a phone that was vibrating so constantly it was slowly inching its way across the nightstand. I picked it up, expecting an update from Jonah or perhaps a frantic text from Mason. Instead, I found myself tagged in a post that was rapidly accumulating sad and care emojis from half the population of Pine Hollow. Darlene had gone nuclear. The post was a masterclass in weaponized victimhood. It was a photo of her standing by Grandma's grave, looking forlorn in black lace, her head bowed in prayer. The caption read, "Please pray for our family during this season of trial." It is hard enough to lose my beloved mother, but it is a sharper pain when a child you raise turns their back on family values. Some people are more interested in money than in honoring the dead. It breaks a mother's heart to see greed tear apart what God brought together. We are just trying to follow Mama's wishes, but the enemy is busy, asking for strength to deal with ungrateful spirits. Family first. Broken-hearted, pray for the Waverleys. She hadn't named me. She didn't have to. In a town this size, "A child you raised" was a neon sign pointing directly at the daughter who lived in Chicago. The comments section was a cesspool of performative sympathy. "Oh, Darlene, I am so sorry. We all know how much you sacrificed for Ellie. Money is the root of all evil. Hun, stay strong. Is this about Aurora?" I always knew she was trouble when she moved up north. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, reading the comments with a cold, detached fascination. This was Darlene's favorite tactic, the court of public opinion. She knew she couldn't win on the facts, so she was trying to win on character. She wanted to make me so ashamed, so socially radioactive, that I would drop the lawsuit just to stop the whispers at the grocery store. A text message popped up at the top of the screen. It was from Brianna. "Brianna, I hope you are happy. Mom has been crying all morning. I can't believe you would humiliate us like this. Brianna, I know what this is really about. Aurora, you are not mad about the will. You are jealous because Grandma trusted Mom and me to handle things, and you can't stand being on the outside. Grow up." I let out a dry laugh. Brianna really believed that. She had drunk the Kool-Aid so deeply she probably had a permanent stain on her upper lip. To her, this wasn't a heist. It was a hierarchy. And she was finally at the top of it. She was the trusted one, the insider, the good daughter. I was just the bitter exile throwing stones at the castle. I considered typing out a furious defense. I considered listing the facts, the secret sale of the house, the stripped screws on the safe, the missing assets. But Jonah's advice rang in my ear. Don't get in the mud with a pig. You get dirty, and the pig likes it. So I did the one thing Darlene would hate more than a fight. I gave her facts. I opened Facebook. I didn't make a new post. I simply commented on her thread, right under a comment from the choir director praising Darlene's saintly patience. My comment was short. "I am not asking for money. Mom, I am just asking you to show me the original will. If everything is transparent, why are you so afraid to let anyone see it?" I hit send. Then I put the phone down and went to take a shower. By the time I came out, the dynamic had shifted. The flow of prayers had slowed. A few people had replied to my comment asking, "Wait, she hasn't shown you the will, Darlene. realizing she was losing control of the narrative, had deleted my comment. Then, 5 minutes later, she deleted the entire post. Victory in round 1. But the silence that followed was short-lived. Around noon, while I was reviewing the case files Jonah had sent over, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't have saved. Unknown, watch your back. Honey, she is cornered. I frowned and typed back, who is this unknown? It is Aunt Sarah. Don't save this number. I am using my work phone. Sarah was my father's sister. She and Darlene had tolerated each other for decades, mostly by maintaining a polite, icy distance. Sarah was the town gossip, but unlike Darlene, her information was usually accurate. Sarah. I saw the Facebook mess. You are right to dig. But you need to know it isn't just about greed. Darlene is in trouble. Aurora. What kind of trouble? Sarah, real trouble. Financial. She came to your Uncle Ted 2 months ago begging him to co-sign a consolidation loan. She is maxed out. Aurora, credit cards. A second mortgage she took out on her own house last year. She told Ted she made some bad investments in some online business scheme Brianna's husband got her into. She is drowning. I stared at the screen, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with a sickening thud. I had assumed Darlene was stealing Grandma's estate because she was entitled. I thought she just wanted the money because she felt she deserved it for putting up with Grandma. But this was worse. This was desperation. Darlene wasn't just grabbing a windfall. She was trying to plug a hole in her own sinking ship. The rush to sell the house off-market before the funeral. She probably needed that cash to pay off a loan shark or an overdue balloon payment before the bank foreclosed on her house. That was why she was so terrified of the probate process. Probate takes months. Darlene needed money days ago. Aurora. Does Brianna know Sarah? Brianna thinks they are investors. She doesn't know her husband lost her mother's retirement fund. If that will comes out and Darlene doesn't get the bulk of the estate, she is bankrupt. She is fighting for her life. Aurora. Be careful. I lowered the phone, feeling a strange mixture of pity and revulsion. My mother wasn't a mastermind. She was a gambler who had lost everything and was now trying to rob the dead to cover her losses. And Brianna, the golden child, was actually the anchor dragging her down via a useless husband. My phone pinged again. This time it was Mason. My brother had been silent since our call the night before. But clearly, the pressure cooker at home was getting to him. He sent a single image, a screenshot of a text conversation between him and Darlene. Mom. Where are you, Mason? Just at work. Mom, listen to me. If anyone from the bank calls you, or if Aurora tries to get you to go to the bank with her, you don't answer. You hear me? Don't let her near the accounts. I am handling it. Mom, she is trying to trick you. She wants to ruin us. Under the screenshot, Mason had typed, I don't think she is protecting us. Rory, I think she is hiding something big. I texted back, she is broke. Mason, Aunt Sarah told me, she needs Grandma's money to pay her own debts. I watched the 3 dots of his typing bubble appear, then disappear, then appear again. Finally, a message came through. Mason, I found a letter in the trash. It was a foreclosure warning for her house. I thought it was a mistake. God. Rory, what do we do? Aurora, you do nothing. You stay out of the blast radius. Let me and the lawyers handle it. I forwarded the screenshots. Aunt Sarah's intel and Mason's text to Jonah. Jonah called me 10 minutes later. His voice was calm. The voice of a man who had seen this movie 100 times. This explains the speed, Jonah said. Desperate people make sloppy mistakes. The fact that she is insolvent actually helps us. It gives us a lever to remove her as executor immediately. A person with a conflict of interest and a history of financial mismanagement cannot be trusted with a fiduciary duty. She is going to hate me, I said quietly. If I expose this, everyone will know she is broke. Her reputation is all she has. She made her choices, Aurora, Jonah said firmly. You are not ruining her reputation. You are preventing her from committing a felony. Taking estate money to pay personal debts is embezzlement. We are doing her a favor by stopping her before she goes to prison. So what happens at the hearing? We present the evidence, Jonah said. But before that, expect an offer. Now that she knows you are lawyered up and not backing down, she will try to buy you out. It is the last gasp. He was right. At 3:00 in the afternoon, an email arrived from Patrice Holloway. The subject line was deceptively cordial. Settlement proposal. Estate of Eleanor Hartley. Ms. Waverly. In the interest of family harmony, and to avoid the unnecessary expense of prolonged litigation, Darlene Waverly is prepared to offer a generous compromise. Upon your signing of a comprehensive release of claims and a non-disclosure agreement regarding the estate's administration, Darlene will issue a payment to you in the amount of $15,000. This payment is a gift from her personal funds. As the estate itself has no liquid value, this offer expires at 5:00 p.m. today. Regards, Patrice Holloway. Esquire, $15,000. It was an insult. It was a crumb thrown from the table. But the wording was what caught my eye. A gift from her personal funds. She doesn't have personal funds, I whispered to the empty room. She is broke. Which meant the money was either coming from the sale of Grandma's jewelry that she had already pawned, or she was borrowing against the very inheritance she swore didn't exist. And the condition non-disclosure agreement, they wanted to gag me. They didn't just want the money. They wanted my silence. They wanted to make sure I never told anyone about the safe, the hidden will, or the debts. I didn't even forward this one to Jonah immediately. I just stared at it, feeling the last thread of attachment to my mother snap. A mother who loved her daughter doesn't ask her to sign an NDA. A criminal asks a witness to sign an NDA. I typed a reply to Patrice. I didn't CC Jonah. I wanted Patrice to hear this from me. Mr. Holloway, my price is the truth. Send me the will, or I will see you in court on Tuesday. Aurora Waverly. I hit send. It felt like slamming a heavy door. The afternoon dragged on. The sun began to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I felt drained, battered by the invisible waves of hostility emanating from the house a few miles away. Then, just as I was thinking about ordering dinner, my email pinged one last time. It wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't family. It was a secure notification from Heartland Credit Union. I had flagged the account for alerts on the legacy portal the night before, thinking nothing would come of it since Darlene had already been denied access. But the subject line made my heart stop. Security alert. Attempted access. Box 19. I opened the email, my fingers flying across the trackpad. Time of incident. 4:45 p.m. today. Location Heartland. Credit Union. Main branch. Details. An individual attempted to access safe deposit box 19 using a power of attorney document. Access was denied due to the account holder's deceased status and the pending probate flag on the file. But it was the next line that made the room spin. Individual identified. As Patrice Holloway. Legal representative. I sat back, my mouth dry. It wasn't Darlene. Darlene was probably at home, playing the martyr. She had sent her lawyer. She had sent Patrice Holloway, a licensed attorney, to try and strong-arm his way into a dead woman's safety deposit box using a power of attorney that expired the moment Grandma took her last breath. Patrice knew the law. He knew a POA was invalid after death. He knew he needed letters testamentary from the court, but he had tried anyway. He had walked into that bank and tried to bluff the manager. Why? Because Darlene couldn't go back. She had already been flagged, so she sent her accomplice. This wasn't just a messy family dispute anymore. Patrice Holloway wasn't just representing a difficult client. He was actively participating in the cover-up. He was risking his license, his career, everything, which meant whatever was in Box 19 wasn't just sentimental. It wasn't just a few $1,000s in bonds. It was something worth risking disbarment for. I picked up the phone and called Jonah. "You need to see this," I said, my voice trembling with adrenaline. "What is it?" Jonah asked. "Patrice Holloway just tried to break into the bank box," I said. "He tried to use a dead POA. The bank stopped him." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Jonah finally spoke, His voice had lost its professional detachment. It was low, dangerous, and very, very interested. "Okay," Jonah said. "That changes the game. If the opposing counsel is personally trying to seize assets without a court order, we are not just looking at a removal of executor." "What are we looking at?" I asked. "We are looking at a conspiracy," Jonah said. "Tomorrow, I am going to ask the judge for a lot more than just a freeze. I am going to ask for a court-appointed master to open that box, and Patrice Holloway is going to be the one holding the crowbar." I hung up the phone. Outside, the sun had set, and the world was dark. But inside my head, everything was finally becoming crystal clear. Darlene thought she was playing chess with her reputation. She thought she could shame me into submission. But while she was busy posting on Facebook, her lawyer was getting caught on a security camera trying to rob a bank. They had made their move, and they had walked right into a trap. The court order was a beautiful thing. It was a single sheet of paper, stamped with the seal of the county clerk, that transformed me from an intruder into an authorized agent of the court. On Wednesday morning, I walked up the steps of Grandma's house, not with a flashlight and a pounding heart, but with a key and a team. Jonah had been brilliant. He argued that given the suspicious activity surrounding the bank box and the attempted sale of the house, an immediate inventory of the property was required to preserve the estate. The judge agreed. But to ensure Darlene could not accuse me of planting evidence or stealing silver spoons, we brought witnesses. Mrs. Calder was there, wearing her Sunday best and a look of grim determination. Beside her was Mr. Henderson, a retired notary public, and a man so by the book he probably ironed his socks. And behind them, looking like he would rather be anywhere else, was a court-approved locksmith named Dave. Darlene opened the door. She did not block the way this time. She stood in the foyer. Her arms crossed so tightly across her chest, I thought her ribs might snap. Her face was pale, devoid of makeup, and her eyes followed me with a mixture of hatred and terror. She knew she could not stop us, if she interfered. The sheriff's deputy parked at the curb would step in. "You are making a mistake," Darlene said, her voice brittle. "You are violating this home." "I am saving it," I said, walking past her without breaking stride. "Mr. Henderson, Mrs. Calder, if you would please follow me to the study first. I want to secure the paperwork before we do anything else." We moved like a forensic team. Mr. Henderson had a clipboard and a camera. Every time I picked something up, he photographed it and logged it. Mrs. Calder stood witness, nodding solemnly. Darlene hovered in the doorway, a silent specter, watching as I dismantled her carefully constructed narrative. I went straight to the filing cabinet in the study. It was mostly empty, just as I suspected. Darlene had purged the obvious things: bank statements, insurance policies, the original will. But criminals, even careful ones, always miss the mundane things. They shred the smoking gun but leave the receipt for the bullets. I found a box of house maintenance records on the bottom shelf, tucked behind a stack of old National Geographic magazines. It looked boring. It looked like receipts for light bulbs and garden mulch. I pulled it out and started flipping through the papers. "Item number 42, Mr. Henderson intoned. Box of miscellaneous receipts." I paused at a stapled invoice dated 4 months ago. It was for emergency roof repair and structural reinforcement. The amount was staggering: $28,500. I frowned. Grandma had never mentioned a roof leak. I looked at the description of work: replacement of shingles, flashing repair, structural beam support. "Mrs. Calder," I said, turning to her, "do you remember a roofing crew being here in May? Big trucks, scaffolding noise?" Mrs. Calder shook her head slowly. "Honey, I am home all day. I see everything. Nobody fixed that roof. A boy came by to clean the gutters in April. But that was it. There were no trucks." I looked closer at the invoice. The company header read, "Apex Home Solutions, LLC." The address was a P.O. box in a town 30 miles away. The logo looked like clip art. I pulled out my phone. "What are you doing?" Darlene snapped from the doorway. That is private financial information. It is estate information, I said, not looking up. And I am the interim administrator as of this morning. I typed Apex Home Solutions, LLC, Tennessee Secretary of State into the search bar. The state's business entity search was public record. It took 10 seconds for the results to load. Entity name Apex Home Solutions, LLC, filing date, February 10th of this year. Registered agent Kyle Miller. The room seemed to tilt. Kyle Miller, that was Brianna's husband, my brother-in-law. A man who had failed at 3 different startups and spent most of his time consulting from his basement, had billed my 80-year-old grandmother $28,000 for a roof that was never touched. "Oh my God," I whispered. I looked at Darlene. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the floor. Her jaw clenched so hard, a muscle feathered in her cheek. She knew. Of course she knew. She had probably authorized the check. "It wasn't just you," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "You brought them in on it. You let Brianna and Kyle steal from her while she was still alive." "It was a loan," Darlene said, her voice tight and high. "Kyle needed capital for his business. Grandma wanted to help. She agreed to it. She agreed to pay for a fake roof." I held up the invoice. "This isn't a loan document. Mom, this is fraud. This is money laundering. You funneled cash out of her account into a shell company so you could bypass the inheritance tax and split it before she even died." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat nervously. "Ms. Waverly, do you want this entered into the log as a discrepancy?" "Log it," I said, staring Darlene down. "Log it as evidence of embezzlement." Darlene flinched as if I had slapped her. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the kitchen. I could hear her frantically dialing a phone number, probably warning Brianna that the house of cards was falling. My phone buzzed. It was Jonah. "I hope you are sitting down," Jonah said. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I am standing in the middle of a crime scene," I said. "I just found a fake invoice from Brianna's husband for nearly 30 grand. "Add it to the pile," Jonah said. "My forensic accountant just finished the first pass on the bank statements we forced them to hand over. We found a withdrawal from the day after your grandmother was admitted to the hospital last month." "How much?" $12,000, Jonah said. It was a cashier's check made out to cash. The memo line on the check request said, "Estate Planning Services," but Aurora, there is no invoice from a lawyer, there is no retainer agreement, and the signature on the withdrawal slip. It is shaky. It looks like someone guided her hand. "Darlene," I said. "She was the only one with her at the hospital." "It gets worse," Jonah continued. "We traced the deposit. A check for exactly $12,000 was deposited into a joint account held by Darlene Waverly and the Pine Hollow Community Church Building Fund. 2 days later, she tried to wash it through a donation, but then she withdrew $6,000 of it back out for reimbursement of expenses. She is stealing from the church, too. Or she is using the church account to hide assets," Jonah said. "Either way, we have her. We have the flow of funds. But Aurora, all of this, the fake roof, the cash withdrawals, this is small potatoes compared to what they are afraid of. These are crimes of opportunity. They are panicked grabs for cash. The real asset, the big one, is still missing." "The will," I said. "Get to the safe," Jonah said. "Dave the locksmith should be there. Open it. Whatever is in there is the reason they are risking prison time for 20 grand here and there." I hung up. "Mr. Henderson, Mrs. Calder, we are going to the sewing room." We marched down the hall. Darlene was in the kitchen, whispering furiously into her phone, but she stopped when she saw us pass. She dropped the phone to her side and followed us, drawn by a morbid, terrifying gravity. The sewing room was exactly as I had left it, except the silence felt heavier now. I pointed to the third panel on the wall. "Dave," I said. "It is behind there." Dave, a man of few words and many tools, nodded. He moved the sewing cabinet aside with a grunt. He saw the scratch I had found, the loose board. He popped the panel off with a pry bar. Revealing the steel plate, and the digital safe with its angry red system lockout light. "Can you open it?" I asked. Dave inspected the stripped screws on the faceplate. "Someone hacked at this pretty good," he muttered. "Amateurs." He pulled out a heavy-duty drill with a diamond-tipped bit. "I am going to have to bore through the lock mechanism. It is going to be loud. It destroys the safe. But the contents will be fine." "Do it," I said. The sound of the drill was excruciating. It was a high-pitched scream of metal on metal that set my teeth on edge. Smoke curled up from the drill site, smelling of ozone and burning steel. I stood with my arms crossed, watching the metal shavings curl onto the floor. Mrs. Calder held a handkerchief to her nose. Mr. Henderson had his camera ready, and Darlene stood in the doorway. She wasn't fighting anymore. She looked defeated, shrunken. She was watching the drill bit grind away the last barrier between her lies and the truth. She knew she couldn't stop it. The law was in the room. The witnesses were in the room. The secrets she had tried to bury in drywall were about to be dragged into the light. Clunk. The sound of the locking mechanism failing was deep and final. Dave pulled the drill back. He took a small hammer and tapped the handle of the safe. It turned. "All clear," Dave said, stepping back. "Ms. Waverly, you should be the one to open it." I stepped forward. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer magnitude of the moment. This was it. This was the voice of the dead speaking to the living. I pulled the heavy steel door open. The interior of the safe was small and dark. There were no stacks of cash. There were no gold bars. There was just a single, thick manila envelope lying on the felt bottom. It was sealed with red wax, an old-fashioned touch that was quintessential Grandma Ellie. I reached in and took it. The envelope felt heavy, substantial. I turned it over, on the front. Written in Grandma's bold, unwavering hand, from before the sickness took her strength, was a message that made the breath catch in my throat. "Aurora. Open this only. If Darlene says you got nothing." The room went dead silent. Mr. Henderson leaned in to get a photo of the envelope. Mrs. Calder let out a small, strangled sob. I looked at Darlene. She was staring at the envelope, her face a mask of absolute horror. She hadn't known. She suspected there was a will. She knew there was a safe, but she hadn't known about the message on the front. She hadn't known that Grandma had predicted her betrayal with such devastating accuracy. "She knew," I said, my voice quiet but filling the room. "She knew exactly what you would do." Darlene didn't speak. She couldn't. The writing on the envelope was a condemnation from beyond the grave, more powerful than any judge's ruling. I turned back to Mr. Henderson. "Are you ready to document the contents?" "I am ready," he said. His voice hushed. I broke the wax seal. It cracked with a sharp snap. I slid my finger under the flap and tore the envelope open. Inside was a blue folder, bound with a legal ribbon. I pulled it out. The title page was crisp and white. "Last Will and Testament of Eleanor Marie Hartley." But that wasn't all. Behind the will was a small, silver thumb drive taped to a piece of cardstock. And below the thumb drive, a handwritten letter on Grandma's personal stationery. I unfolded the letter first. My eyes scanned the familiar handwriting, tears blurring my vision for a second before I blinked them away. I needed to read this. I needed to know. "My dearest Aurora, if you are reading this, my heart breaks, because it means I was right. I hoped I was wrong. I prayed that when I passed, your mother would rise to the occasion, but I know my daughter. She loves the things I own more than she loves the people I leave behind. I have not left you nothing. I have left you everything that matters. But I had to hide it. I had to hide it because if Darlene found it first, it would have been ashes in the fireplace before my body was in the ground." I looked up. The weight of the paper in my hand felt like a shield. I wasn't just a claimant anymore. I was the chosen one. "Mr. Henderson," I said, "please note that the will is intact, original, and includes a personal letter of instruction." I looked at Darlene one last time. She was leaning against the doorframe, looking like she might slide to the floor. "You lied," I said to her. You looked me in the eye at her funeral, and you lied. Darlene closed her eyes, turning her face away. I looked back at the safe. There was one more thing in the back, tucked into the shadows. I reached in and pulled it out. It was a small velvet pouch. Inside was Grandma's diamond engagement ring, the one Darlene had been looking for since the moment Grandma died, the one she had accused the hospice nurses of stealing. I held the ring in my palm. It caught the light, fracturing it into 1,000 rainbows. "She didn't lose it," I whispered. "She saved it." I closed my fist around the ring. The investigation was over. The war was just beginning, and for the first time, I had all the ammunition. The silence in the sewing room was absolute. It was not the peaceful silence of a library, but the heavy, pressurized silence of a bomb disposal site right before the wire is cut. The air felt thin. Dust motes danced in the shaft of sunlight hitting the steel safe, illuminating the blue legal folder I held in my hands. Mr. Henderson, the court-appointed witness, cleared his throat. It was a dry scratching sound. "Ms. Waverly," he said softly, "please proceed with the inventory." I nodded, though my hands felt like they belonged to someone else. I untied the ribbon binding the folder. The fabric rustled, a whisper that seemed to echo off the walls. I opened the cover. The document inside was pristine. The paper was heavy, cream-colored bond, the kind lawyers use for things that are meant to last forever. At the bottom of the first page, the embossed seal of a notary public was raised and distinct. It was dated August 14th of last year. I began to read aloud. My voice was shaky at first, but it gained strength as the legalese gave way to the undeniable voice of my grandmother. I, Eleanor Marie Hartley, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all prior wills and codicils. I skipped the standard preamble and went straight to Article 3, Distribution of Assets. I give, devise, and bequeath the entirety of my investment portfolio held with Vanguard, my life insurance policy, number 4920, and the deed to the commercial rental property on 4th Street in Nashville, to my granddaughter, Aurora Waverly. I stopped. The room spun slightly. I looked at the valuation summary attached to the back of the document. I ran the numbers in my head, converting the columns into a reality I could not quite grasp. The investment account alone was over $1 million. The commercial property, a brick building downtown that I thought she had sold years ago, was appraised at $800,000. The insurance policy was another $250,000. It was over $2 million. $2 million. "Oh, Grandma," I whispered. I looked up. Darlene was still leaning against the doorframe, but she had slid down few inches, looking smaller, older. Her face was gray. She was not looking at me. She was staring at the floor, her lips moving silently as if she were trying to calculate an escape route that no longer existed. "Read the rest," Darlene croaked. Her voice was unrecognizable. "Read what she gave me." I turned the page. Article 4. To my daughter, Darlene Waverly, I leave the sum of $50,000. Darlene let out a sharp, bitter laugh. 50,000, after 40 years, 50,000. "Wait," I said. "There is a condition." I read the next paragraph, the words sharp and deliberate. "This bequest to Darlene Waverly is strictly conditional. It shall only be distributed if, and only if, Darlene Waverly provides the executor with full and immediate access to all financial records, medical directives, and personal effects without delay or obstruction. If any attempt is made to conceal, alter, or destroy any part of my estate, or if the validity of this will is contested, this bequest is immediately revoked, and the sum shall revert to the residuary estate of Aurora Waverly." The silence returned, colder this time. Grandma hadn't just cut Darlene out. She had put her in a behavioral vice. If Darlene had just handed over the will, if she had just played fair, she would have walked away with $50,000, enough to pay off the credit cards Aunt Sarah had told me about. But by hiding the will, by lying, by trying to sell the house off-market, Darlene had violated the condition. She had cheated herself out of the only money she was ever going to get. "She knew," Darlene whispered. "She knew I would try." "She hoped you wouldn't," I said, my voice thick with grief. "But she prepared for it." I turned to the back of the folder. There was a smaller envelope clipped to the last page. It was handwritten, addressing me directly. I unclipped it. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, smelling faintly of the lavender sachets Grandma used to keep in her drawers. I read it silently first, and the words hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I had to brace myself against the sewing table. "My darling Aurora, if you are holding this, it means the worst has happened. It means your mother told you there was nothing for you. It means she tried to erase you. You need to know why I did this, why I was so secretive, why I didn't tell you about the money while I was alive. I did not keep it from you because I didn't trust you. I kept it from you because I didn't trust her." I knew that if Darlene knew the size of the estate, she would have found a way to bleed it dry before I was gone. She would have guilted me, bullied me, or tricked me. I had to protect your future by hiding it in the one place she never looked the truth. I have sent a duplicate copy of this will to a firm in Knoxville, totally unconnected to Patrice or anyone in this town. They have instructions to come forward 30 days after my death, if you have not contacted them. I set this safe as a test. I wanted to give Darlene one last chance to be a mother. If she had given you the key, she would have been taken care of. But if you had to break this wall down to find it, then she has failed. Do not feel guilty for taking what is yours. You are not the one left behind. You are the one I hid away to keep safe. Love, Grandma. Tears, hot and fast, spilled down my cheeks. I had spent years thinking I was the outcast, the one Grandma loved less because I lived far away. But all that time, she was building a fortress around me. She wasn't pushing me away. She was stashing me in a vault where Darlene couldn't reach me. Ms. Waverly, Miss Henderson, asked gently, "Is there anything else?" I wiped my face with my sleeve. "There is a USB drive." I pointed to the silver thumb drive taped to the bottom of the folder. Written on the cardstock in black marker were 3 words: "For the judge." I pulled my laptop out of my bag. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 2 tries to insert the drive into the port. I placed the laptop on the sewing table so the witnesses and Darlene could see the screen. I clicked on the single video file. The screen flickered, and then, there she was. Grandma Ellie sat in this very room, in her favorite armchair. She was wearing her blue Sunday dress. She looked frail, her skin paper-thin, but her eyes were bright and focused. She looked directly into the camera lens. "My name is Eleanor Marie Hartley," she began. Her voice was strong, devoid of the confusion Darlene claimed she had suffered from. "Today is August 14th. I am making this recording to accompany my last will and testament." She took a breath, clasping her hands in her lap. "I am of sound mind. I know exactly what I own, and I know exactly who I am leaving it to. I am leaving the bulk of my estate to my granddaughter, Aurora Waverly." On the screen, Grandma leaned forward slightly, her expression hardening. "I am doing this because Aurora is the only person in this family who has never asked me for a dime. She is the only one who calls me just to hear my voice. She is the only one who didn't turn love into an invoice." I heard a gasp from the doorway. Darlene had covered her mouth with her hand. The line about the invoice, it was as if Grandma had seen the fake roofing bill from the future. "I know my daughter, Darlene, will be upset," Grandma continued on the screen. "I know she will say I was manipulated. I know she will say I was senile. This video is proof that I am not." Then, Grandma's eyes narrowed. She looked fierce, almost scary. "And if you are watching this, Judge, I need to be very clear about one thing. My attorney is not Patrice Holloway. Patrice is a friend of my daughter. He does not represent my interests. If Patrice Holloway presents any document, any codicil, or any power of attorney signed by me after this date, it is a lie. If Patrice contacts you, that is not my wish. That is Darlene speaking through a puppet." The video ended. The screen went black. For 10 seconds, Nobody breathed. Grandma hadn't just left a will. She had left a sniper shot. She had predicted the exact lawyer Darlene would use, the exact arguments she would make, and she had dismantled them on camera months before she died. She knew about Patrice, I said, looking at the black screen. She knew he was dirty. Darlene pushed herself off the doorframe. She looked like she was going to be sick. She didn't say a word. She just turned and stumbled down the hallway, her footsteps uneven and heavy. I picked up the phone. Jonah was on the line. I had dialed him in before playing the video, and he had heard everything through the speaker. "Jonah?" I asked. "Did you hear that?" "I heard it," Jonah said. His voice was low, filled with a kind of professional awe. "Aurora, that video is the most beautiful thing I have ever heard in a probate case. Is it enough?" I asked. "Is it enough to stop them?" "Stop them." Jonah let out a sharp breath. "Aurora, with that video and that letter, we don't just get your money back, we destroy them. That video proves premeditated fraud by Darlene and professional misconduct by Patrice. I am going to file this with the court within the hour." He paused, and his tone shifted from lawyer to human. "Your mother isn't just removed as executor," Jonah said. "After the judge sees that video, and then sees the evidence of Patrice trying to break into the bank box, Darlene is going to be lucky if she isn't indicted. You have cut the head off the snake." I looked down at the will, at the signature that represented 80 years of a life lived with integrity. I ran my thumb over the wax seal. "It is over, isn't it?" I asked. "The lie is over," Jonah said. "Now comes the justice." I closed the laptop. I felt a strange lightness, a release of tension I had been carrying since I was 19 years old. I looked at Mrs. Calder. She was weeping silently, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "She loved you so much, honey," Mrs. Calder said. "She was so proud of you." "I know," I said, and for the first time since the funeral, I actually believed it. I gathered the papers, the USB, and the ring. I walked out of the sewing room, leaving the empty safe and the drilled-out lock behind me. I walked down the hall, past the kitchen where Darlene was sitting at the table, her head in her hands, sobbing with the guttural sound of total ruin. I didn't stop to comfort her. I didn't stop to gloat. I walked out the front door into the bright, blinding Tennessee sun. I had the truth. I had the money. But most importantly, I had the answer to the question that had haunted me my whole life. I wasn't the unloved child. I was the treasure. And now, the whole world was going to know it. The fallout from the safe opening was not a surrender. It was an explosion. If I thought finding the will would make Darlene back down, I had severely underestimated her capacity for delusion. Jonah filed the documents with the probate court at 9 o'clock on Thursday morning. He submitted the original will, the video of Grandma, and an emergency motion to remove Darlene as executor based on intentional concealment of assets and breach of fiduciary duty. By noon, Darlene's team fired back. I was sitting in Jonah's conference room when the response brief came through. It was a thick, angry stack of paper that painted a picture of reality so distorted it made me feel like I was reading a fantasy novel. Darlene wasn't denying the existence of the will. She couldn't. We had the physical paper. Instead, she was attacking the source. Her countermotion claimed that the will dated August 14th was invalid due to lack of testamentary capacity. She alleged that Grandma was suffering from advanced dementia and paranoia, but the knife in the gut was the accusation leveled at me. Darlene claimed that I had systematically alienated Grandma from the rest of the family during phone calls, and that the video was clearly scripted and coerced by a manipulative granddaughter seeking to punish her mother. She was accusing me of elder abuse. She was accusing me of brainwashing the woman who had saved me. "She is desperate," Jonah said, tossing the brief onto the mahogany table. "This is the spaghetti defense. She is throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. She wants to drag this out into a competency hearing that could take years. Can she do that?" I asked, feeling a cold knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. Grandma looked fine in the video. "The video is strong," Jonah said. But Darlene is counting on the fact that judges are hesitant to rule against family unless the medical evidence is ironclad. She is betting we don't have the medicals. I smiled. A tight, grim expression. Then she is going to lose that bet too. I had already called Dr. Vance. Dr. Vance had been Grandma's primary care physician for 20 years. He was an old-school doctor, the kind who still made house calls and remembered the names of his patients' grandchildren. When Grandma started getting sick, Darlene had tried to switch her to a new, younger doctor in the city, someone who didn't know the history. Grandma had refused. 2 hours later, we had the affidavit. Dr. Vance didn't just provide a note. He provided the results of a mini mental state examination conducted on August 10th, just 4 days before Grandma signed the will. Grandma had scored a 29 out of 30. A score of 29 indicates perfectly normal cognitive function, but the real smoking gun came from the hospice nurse, a woman named Sarah, who had cared for Grandma in those final, brutal weeks. Jonah's investigator had tracked Sarah down. Her statement was devastating. I witnessed Darlene Waverly on multiple occasions attempt to pressure the patient into signing documents without reading them. The affidavit read, "On September 20th, 6 days before the patient passed, Darlene Waverly shouted at the patient for refusing to sign a retroactive approval for the bank transfers. The patient was distressed and asked me to lock the door. Darlene Waverly told me that her mother was losing her mind and that I should ignore her protests. In my professional opinion, Eleanor Hartley was fully oriented to time, place, and person until the moment she lost consciousness. This kills the dementia argument," Jonah said, sliding the paper into the case file. "And it establishes a pattern of coercion. Darlene wasn't protecting a confused old lady. She was bullying a sharp one. While the lawyers were sharpening their knives, the family was fracturing. Mason called me at 3 o'clock. He didn't want to talk on the phone. He asked me to meet him in the parking lot of the high school stadium, a place where we used to hide from Darlene when we were teenagers. When I pulled up, Mason was sitting on the hood of his truck, staring at the empty bleachers. He looked 10 years older than he had at the funeral. He looked exhausted, the kind of soul-deep weary that comes from realizing your entire life has been managed by a lie. I got out and stood next to him. We didn't hug. We just watched the wind ripple the flags on the goalposts. She told me to say I never saw the safe, Mason said, his voice flat. I know, I said. No, Rory, you don't know. Mason turned to look at me, his eyes red-rimmed. She didn't just ask me to lie. She threatened me. She said if I helped you, I was betraying the family. She said if the house doesn't sell, it is my fault if she ends up on the street. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen and handed it to me. I recorded this last night, he said. After you left the house with the will, she didn't know I was in the hallway. I pressed play. The audio was slightly muffled, recorded through a door, but Darlene's voice was unmistakable. It was high-pitched, frantic, bordering on hysterical. She found it. I don't know how, but the little bitch found it. No, Patrice, you don't understand. If they audit the accounts, they are going to see the transfers to Kyle's company. They are going to see the loan. I need you to fix this. Tell the judge she is crazy. Tell them she forged the will. I don't care what you have to do. Just stop her from getting access to the bank records. The recording ended with the sound of something shattering, probably a vase being thrown against a wall. I handed the phone back to Mason, my hand shaking slightly. Mason, this proves she knows about the fraud. This proves she is conspiring with Patrice to lie to the court. I know, Mason whispered. Tears began to track through the dust on his cheeks. That is my mother. Rory, I am handing you the weapon to destroy my mother. She destroyed herself. Mace, I said gently, you are just refusing to go down with the ship. Take it, Mason said, forwarding the file to my email. Just don't make me testify against her. Please. I hope I won't have to, I said, but Darlene wasn't the only one crumbling. Jonah's forensic accountant had finished connecting the dots on the roof repair invoice I had found. We knew the money had gone to Apex Home Solutions, the shell company registered to Brianna's husband, Kyle, But now, we had the flow of funds. We requested a meeting with Brianna. We didn't subpoena her. We just invited her to Jonah's office to discuss her potential liability. Brianna arrived alone. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a designer coat that looked like armor. She marched into the conference room, tossed her bag on the table, and glared at me. "This is harassment," she spat. "Mom says you are bluffing. Mom says the will is a fake." "Sit down, Brianna," Jonah said. His voice was not unkind, but it carried the weight of a falling anvil. Brianna remained standing. "I am not saying a word without a lawyer." "You don't need a lawyer yet," Jonah said, "but your husband might." He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a flowchart. It showed the $28,000 payment from Grandma's account to Apex Home Solutions. Then, it showed a transfer of $20,000 from Apex to a personal checking account held by Kyle and Brianna Miller. And finally, it showed a payment of $10,000 from that account to a credit card company, a card in Darlene Waverly's name. Brianna looked at the chart. She blinked. She looked again. Her face went from flush to chalk white in the span of 3 seconds. "What is this?" she whispered. "This is money laundering." Jonah said simply, "Your husband invoiced the estate for work that was never done. Then he kicked back half the money to your mother to pay her debts, and you two kept the rest. That is wire fraud. Brianna, that is a federal crime." I didn't know," Brianna stammered. Her arrogance evaporated. "Kyle told me it was an investment. Mom told me Grandma wanted to help Kyle's business. She said it was a loan." "There is no loan agreement," I said from the other side of the table. "There is just a fake invoice for a roof that doesn't leak. Mom used Kyle to steal the money because she knew she couldn't take it herself without raising flags. She made you an accomplice. Brianna." Brianna sank into the chair. She looked at the paper, then at me. The betrayal in her eyes was absolute. She realized in that moment that she wasn't the golden child. She was the patsy. Darlene had set her up to take the fall if the scheme unraveled. "She told me everything was legal," Brianna said, her voice trembling. "She promised." "She lied," I said. "Just like she lied to me." Brianna looked up, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "I don't want to go to jail. Aurora, I have kids." "Then stop protecting her," Jonah said. "Cooperate with the independent administrator. Verify that the work was never done. If you help us clear up the accounting, we can frame this as you being misled by the executor. But if you stick with Darlene, you go down with Apex." Brianna didn't say yes immediately. She just put her head in her hands and wept. But I knew she was done. Darlene had lost her soldiers. The final blow came on Friday morning, at the preliminary status hearing. It wasn't a full trial, just a hearing to determine if there was enough evidence to suspend Darlene's powers pending a full review. Darlene wasn't there. She claimed she was indisposed due to stress. Patrice Holloway appeared on her behalf. Patrice looked like a man who hadn't slept in 3 days. His suit was rumpled. He was sweating. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Silas, who had seen every trick in the book, looked over her reading glasses at him. "Mr. Holloway," Judge Silas said, "I have a report here from Hearthland Credit Union. It states that you attempted to access the decedent's safety deposit box on Tuesday afternoon. Is that correct?" Patrice shifted his weight. "Your Honor, I was merely acting on my client's instructions to inventory potential assets for the estate." "With a power of attorney?" the judge asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "You are an officer of the court. Mr. Holloway, you know perfectly well that a power of attorney expires upon death. Did you present a death certificate?" There was some confusion regarding the paperwork," Patrice stammered. "I was trying to secure the contents before they could be tampered with." "Tampered with by whom?" Jonah stood up, his voice booming. "My client, the sole beneficiary. The only person tampering with assets is the executor, who has failed to list that box on her initial inventory." Judge Silas slammed her gavel down. It sounded like a gunshot. "Mr. Holloway, Your conduct is bordering on contempt. You attempted to access a sealed box without letters testamentary. That is a serious breach. She turned her gaze to the clerk. I am accepting the plaintiff's evidence into the record. The video testimony of the deceased is admitted. The medical affidavits are admitted. And I am setting a hearing for Monday morning to make a final ruling on the removal of Darlene Waverly as executor. Mr. Holloway, I suggest you advise your client to be present. If she is not here, I will issue a bench warrant. We walked out of the courtroom into the hallway. My knees felt weak. We were winning. We were crushing them. But as the adrenaline faded, a wave of profound sadness washed over me. I walked over to a bench and sat down, putting my head back against the cold plaster wall. You okay? Jonah asked, sitting beside me. I don't feel like a winner, I said quietly. I feel sick. That is normal, Jonah said. Is it? I looked at him. I just watched my brother cry because he had to record our mother. I just watched my sister realize her husband is a criminal because of our mother. And I just realized that my entire childhood, every time Darlene was nice to me, every time she punished me, it was all just a calculation. I wasn't a daughter to her. I was an asset to be managed, or a liability to be liquidated. It was the hardest truth of all. The money didn't matter. The $2 million didn't matter. What mattered was that my mother had looked at me, her own flesh and blood, and seen nothing but a threat to her bank account. She had been willing to destroy my future to save her own skin. Aurora, Jonah said firmly, listen to me. You didn't break this family. This family was broken a long time ago. It was held together by lies and glue. All you did was turn on the lights. The roaches were already there. He handed me a bottle of water. You are grieving, he said, not just for your grandmother, but for the mother you wish you had. But you can't save her. Aurora, she made her choices. Now you have to make yours. Do you walk away and let her keep doing this, or do you finish it? I took a drink of water. I thought about Grandma's letter. You are not the one left behind. You are the one I hid away to keep safe. I stood up. The sadness was still there, but it had hardened into resolve. We finish it, I said. Good, Jonah said, because on Monday, when we win that hearing, we get full access. We get the keys to the house, the bank accounts, everything. And if I am right, what we have found so far is just the tip of the iceberg. Once Darlene loses control, all the skeletons she has been hiding in that closet are going to come tumbling out. I walked toward the exit doors. The sky outside was gray and heavy with rain. Let them fall, I said. The weekend before the final hearing felt less like a pause and more like the pullback of a slingshot. The tension in Pine Hollow was physical. The humid air felt heavy with unsaid words and pending judgments. On Sunday afternoon, just 24 hours before we were due in court to decide the fate of the executorship, Darlene played her last card. It came in the form of a courier packet delivered to Jonah's office, marked Settlement Offer, Final. Jonah called me in to read it. We sat in his glass-walled conference room, the Sunday silence of the office magnifying the sound of paper shuffling. They are upping the ante, Jonah said, sliding the document toward me. I looked at the numbers. It was no longer the insulting $15,000 they had offered before. Now, the number was $250,000. $250,000, I said, reading the figure written out in bold text. Where did she get this? She is broke. She is probably borrowing against the house she hasn't sold yet, or she found a hard money lender, Jonah said. But look at the terms. Aurora. The money isn't the point. The point is page 3. I flipped to page 3. The heading read, Non-Disparagement and Confidentiality Agreement. The terms were draconian. If I accepted the money, I had to agree to seal all court records. I had to agree to never discuss the estate, the will, or the circumstances of administration with anyone. I had to withdraw my petition to remove Darlene as executor. Essentially, Darlene was offering to pay me $250,000 to bury the truth about her fraud forever. She wanted to buy her reputation back. If you sign this, Jonah said, watching me closely, you walk away with cash today. The fight ends, but Darlene stays in control. She keeps the rest of the millions, and she keeps her standing in the community. Nobody ever knows she tried to rob her own mother. I looked at the signature line. It would be so easy. I could take the money, go back to Chicago, and forget I ever had a family in Tennessee. But then I thought about the scratch on the wall behind the sewing cabinet. I thought about Grandma's video. "You are the one I hid away to keep safe." "No," I said. I didn't even slide the paper back. I just closed the folder. "Tell Patrice Holloway that my price hasn't changed," I said. "I want the truth read into the public record. I want the judge to say it out loud." Jonah smiled, a sharp, predatory grin. "I was hoping you would say that, because while you were reading that, my forensic auditor sent over the final piece of the puzzle regarding the bank box." He opened his laptop and turned the screen toward me. "We knew Darlene was moving money," Jonah said, "but we couldn't figure out how she was authorizing the transfers before your grandmother died. Grandma was sharp. She wouldn't have signed checks for roofing companies that didn't exist." "She forged the signature," I asked. "Better?" Jonah said. "She used a power of attorney. We found the digital footprints at the bank. Darlene presented a general durable power of attorney to the teller at Heartland Credit Union on August 20th, 22nd, and 29th. That is how she moved the money to Brianna's husband." "But Grandma gave her power of attorney years ago," I said. "I remember that. For emergencies." "Yes," Jonah said. "But here's the twist. We found a notation in the bank's internal log from August 15th, the day after Grandma signed the new will." He pointed to a line on the spreadsheet. "Log note customer E. Hartley appeared in person. Revocation of POA filed. No changes made to account status." My mouth fell open. "She revoked it?" "She revoked it a month before she died," Jonah said. "Which means every time Darlene used that document after August 15th, she was committing bank fraud. She was using a voided instrument, and there is only one place the physical copy of that revocation would be." "Box 19, I whispered. "Exactly," Jonah said. "That is why Patrice tried to break in. They need to destroy the revocation document. If that paper exists, Darlene isn't just a bad executor. She is a felon." Jonah picked up his phone. "I already called the emergency duty judge. Given the evidence of the revoked POA usage, he signed the order an hour ago. We are opening Box 19. Today." We met the bank manager at Heartland Credit Union an hour later. It was Sunday, so the branch was closed. The lobby was dim, lit only by the security lights. The air conditioning was off, making the air stale and still. The manager, a nervous man named Mr. Abernathy, looked terrified. He had received a court order on a Sunday afternoon, which clearly wasn't in his job description. "I have the master key," Mr. Abernathy said, his voice echoing in the empty vault. "Ms. Waverly, you have the customer key." I pulled the silver key with the faded tag from my pocket. It felt warm in my hand. We walked into the vault. It was a room of steel and silence, lined with hundreds of small, numbered doors. Box 19 was at eye level. Mr. Abernathy inserted his key. I inserted mine. We turned them in unison. The lock clicked. I pulled the long metal box out and carried it to the viewing table. Jonah stood beside me, his phone recording the process. I lifted the lid. Inside, sitting on top of a stack of savings bonds, was a document titled Revocation of Durable Power of Attorney. It was notarized, signed by Grandma, and dated August 15th. "There it is," Jonah said softly. "The nail in the coffin." But underneath it was something else, a plain white envelope. On the front, in Grandma's handwriting, it simply said, "To the probate judge." "She really didn't leave anything to chance," I murmured. I opened the letter. It wasn't a legal document. It was a confession, or rather, an accusation. "To the Honorable Judge, I am writing this because I fear my daughter, Darlene, has lost her way over the last year. I have noticed money missing from my bedside drawer. I have seen charges on my credit card for stores I do not visit. When I confronted her, she told me I was forgetting things. She told me I was confused, but I'm not confused. I know she is in debt. I overheard her on the phone begging for an extension on her mortgage. I know she has used my money to pay her visa bill $3,000 on July 4th, $2,000 on July 18th. I stopped reading, my stomach churning. Aunt Sarah was right. The dates, the amounts Grandma had tracked it all. She had watched her own daughter steal from her, and instead of confronting her and causing a scene, she had quietly documented every theft, notarized the revocation, and locked it away for the authorities to find. It was heartbreaking. It was the act of a woman who knew she was being preyed upon by the person who was supposed to care for her. "We have the motive," Jonah said, reading over my shoulder. "She wasn't stealing for the estate. She was stealing to survive. She was drowning in debt and using Grandma as a life raft." We took the box's contents into custody. As we walked out of the bank, the sun was setting, casting long, bruised purple shadows across the parking lot. "I am sending a copy of this to Patrice immediately," Jonah said. "He needs to know that we know. It might force a surrender before tomorrow, but it didn't force a surrender. It forced an implosion," according to Mason, who texted me later that night. The email from Jonah hit Patrice's inbox at 6 o'clock. Patrice, realizing he was potentially facing disbarment for helping Darlene cover this up, must have called Darlene in a panic, and Darlene, cornered and vicious, turned on the nearest target. Mason said the screaming started around 7. I wasn't there, but the way he described it, the walls of the family home were shaking. Brianna had come over for dinner, still trying to play the part of the supportive daughter, though she was already rattled by the revelation about her husband's LLC. When Darlene got the call about the revoked POA being found, she snapped. She didn't take responsibility. She blamed Brianna. Mason sent me a transcript of what he heard from the hallway. "Darlene, you were supposed to talk to Kyle. You said the LLC was untraceable. Brianna, I didn't know about the revocation. Mom, you told me Grandma signed everything. You told me it was legal, Darlene. Oh, grow up. Brianna, do you think money just appears? I did what I had to do to save this family. If you had just kept your mouth shut and convinced Kyle to hide the paper trail better, we wouldn't be here. You are useless." I should have asked Mason. That was the breaking point. Brianna had spent her entire life trying to be Darlene's mirror. She had married the right man, bought the right clothes, and sneered at me on command, all to earn Darlene's approval. And in one sentence, "You are useless." Darlene shattered it. She admitted that she had used Brianna as a shield, a pawn to take the fall for the financial crimes. Mason said Brianna walked out of the house 5 minutes later. She didn't slam the door. She just left it open. She got in her car and drove away, leaving Darlene screaming at the empty foyer. At 8 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Brianna. I hesitated before answering. I expected anger. I expected her to blame me for ruining her life. "Hello?" "She knew," Brianna said. Her voice was unrecognizable, hollow, stripped of all its usual affectation. "She knew the POA was revoked. She made Kyle sign those invoices knowing it was fraud. She set us up, Aurora." "I know," I said gently. "I am not going to court tomorrow," Brianna said. "I am not sitting on her side of the aisle. I am done. I told Kyle to call a lawyer. We are going to cooperate with Jonah." "That is the right move, Brianna," I said. "She doesn't love us," Brianna whispered, and the sound of it broke my heart, even after everything. "She just loves how we make her look. Get some sleep," I said. "It is over soon." I hung up. Darlene was alone. Her allies had fled. Her lawyer was likely drafting his resignation letter to save his license. Her secrets were in a box in Jonah's office. But Jonah had one last surprise for the morning. I made a phone call. Jonah told me when I checked in with him at 9 o'clock. "Remember the notary? The one on the POA document that Darlene tried to use? The one she used after it was revoked?" "Yes, her name is Mrs. Gable. She is a nice woman, very religious. Patrice called her yesterday. He tried to remind her that Grandma was lucid when she signed the papers. He tried to coach her testimony." "That is witness tampering," I said. "It is," Jonah agreed. "And Mrs. Gable didn't like it. She called me. She is coming to the hearing tomorrow. Aurora, She is going to testify that Darlene brought the papers to her house after Grandma was already in the hospital and asked her to backdate the stamp. Mrs. Gable refused to backdate it, but she admitted she felt pressured to notarize a signature she didn't personally witness because she trusted Darlene. So the POA wasn't just revoked, I said. The signature on the checks might have been forged entirely. We will find out tomorrow, Jonah said. But having the notary testify that she was pressured, that is the end game. Judge Silas will not only remove Darlene, she will refer the case to the district attorney. I laid in my bed that night, staring at the ceiling. The war was won. The enemy was routed. But there was no joy in it, just a heavy, quiet sense of finality. My phone buzzed one last time on the nightstand. It was 11:30 at night. I picked it up, a text message from Mom. I stared at the screen. She hadn't texted me since the day of the funeral. Mom, you think you are smart. You think winning in court makes you a winner. Go ahead. Take the money. Take the house. You won. But you will lose the family. Nobody wants a traitor at the Christmas table. Hope the money keeps you warm. I read it twice. Even now, at the bitter end. She was trying to negotiate. She was trying to barter access to the family as if it were a prize she could withhold. She still thought that her approval was the currency I craved. She thought that threatening me with exile would make me stumble. But she didn't understand. I wasn't losing the family. I was escaping it. I typed a reply, my fingers steady. Aurora. I am not the traitor. Mom. I am the only one who told the truth, and I don't need a seat at a table built on lies. I didn't send it. Instead, I deleted the draft. I blocked the number. I put the phone down and turned off the light. The silence in the room was deep and peaceful. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't waiting for her permission to sleep. I was free. Monday morning in the county probate court was a study in contrasts. On one side of the aisle sat Darlene Waverly, dressed in a muted charcoal suit that whispered modest grief, clutching a handkerchief she had been using to dab at dry eyes for the last 20 minutes. Beside her, Patrice Holloway looked like a man waiting for a guillotine blade to drop. He was sweating, shifting in his seat, and avoiding eye contact with the bench. On our side, the table was clean, no tissues, no theatrics, just a stack of evidence folders and a laptop. Judge Silas entered the room with the sweeping authority of a woman who had no patience for nonsense. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and looked directly at Darlene. We are here to address the emergency motion to remove the executor and the counter motion regarding the validity of the will, Judge Silas said. Mrs. Waverly, your counsel claims this will is a forgery and a product of undue influence. Do you stand by that statement? Darlene stood up. Her voice was trembling, a perfect vibrato of victimhood. I do, Your Honor, she said. My mother was not herself. She was confused. My daughter, Aurora, has always been difficult. She was estranged from this family. She came back only when she smelled money. I believe she manipulated my mother during her confused states. I was only trying to protect the estate from being looted by someone who did not care about Mama while she was alive. It was a good performance. If I did not know better, I might have believed her. She painted a picture of a devoted caretaker besieging a fortress against a greedy invader. Thank you, Mrs. Waverly, Judge Silas said. She turned to Jonah. Mr. Keene, your response? Jonah stood up. He did not raise his voice. He simply walked to the podium. Your Honor, we are not here to trade insults. We are here to trade facts. And the facts show that the only person looting this estate was the executor herself. Jonah began to lay out the cards we had spent the last week collecting. He started with the will itself, pointing out the date and the clear, cogent language. Then, he introduced the medical affidavits from Dr. Vance and the hospice nurse, effectively nuking the dementia argument. But the court does not need to rely on doctors, Jonah said. The deceased can speak for herself. He plugged the laptop into the court's display system. Grandma Ellie's face filled the monitors. The room went silent as her voice, strong and sharp, cut through the air. I am leaving the bulk of my estate to my granddaughter, Aurora Waverly, because she is the only one who didn't turn love into an invoice. I watched Darlene during the video. She stared at the screen, her face pale, her jaw set so hard I thought her teeth might crack. She was watching her own mother testify against her from the grave. When the video ended, Jonah didn't stop. He held up the letter we found in Box 19, the one addressed to the judge. Exhibit C, Jonah said, a letter handwritten by Eleanor Hartley, detailing specific dates and amounts of money Darlene Waverly stole from her accounts prior to death. This matches the bank records we have subpoenaed, which show payments to credit cards in Mrs. Waverly's name. Patrice stood up, his voice cracking. Objection. This is hearsay. It is a declaration against interest found in a secure location, Judge Silas snapped. Overruled. Continue. Mr. Keene. Jonah moved to the kill shot. We also have the testimony of Mrs. Gable, the notary public. Mrs. Gable, a small, terrified woman in a floral dress, took the stand. Under Jonah's gentle questioning, she admitted the truth. Mr. Holloway called me on Sunday, she whispered into the microphone. He told me that I should say I was there when Mrs. Hartley signed the power of attorney, but I wasn't. Darlene brought the papers to my house after Eleanor was already in the hospital. She told me it was just a formality. She said if I didn't stamp it, they would lose the house. Judge Silas turned her gaze to Patrice. It was a look that could strip paint off a wall. Mr. Holloway, the judge said, her voice dropping to a dangerous register. Did you attempt to suborn perjury? I was merely refreshing the witness's recollection, Patrice stammered, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. And the attempt to access the safety deposit box at Hearthland Credit Union using a revoked power of attorney, the judge asked. Was that also refreshing your recollection? Patrice opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He slumped back in his chair, defeated. But Darlene wasn't done. She stood up again, ignoring Patrice's hand trying to pull her down. This is a setup, Darlene cried out. Aurora broke into my house. She planted that will. She drilled into a wall to hide it there so she could find it. I never knew that safe existed. My mother never told me about a safe. The courtroom froze. This was the moment. Darlene had just gone on record. Judge Silas leaned forward. Mrs. Waverly, let me be very clear. You are stating, under oath, that you had absolutely no knowledge of the hidden wall safe in the sewing room prior to your daughter opening it. I had no knowledge, Darlene said, her chin high. It is a fabrication. Jonah looked at me and nodded. Your Honor, Jonah said, we have one final piece of evidence, a recording provided by Mason Waverly, the defendant's son, taken on the night the will was discovered. Jonah pressed play on the audio file. Darlene's voice, screeching and hysterical, filled the courtroom. She found it. I don't know how, but the little bitch found it. If they audit the accounts, they are going to see the transfers to Kyle's company. I don't care what you have to do. Just stop her from getting access. The silence that followed was total. Darlene stood there, the blood draining from her face until she looked like a wax figure, the echo of her own voice, admitting to the fraud and the knowledge of the safe, hung in the air like smoke. She looked at the judge, then at the gallery, and finally at me. There was no anger in her eyes anymore, just the hollow, terrifying realization that she was naked before the world. Judge Silas didn't bang her gavel. She didn't need to. She just started writing. The court finds the testimony of Darlene Waverly to be not credible, Judge Silas said, her voice crisp and final. The motion to remove Darlene Waverly as executor is granted immediately. The court appoints the public administrator to take over the estate pending a full forensic audit. She looked up at Patrice. Mr. Holloway, I am referring this matter, along with the transcript of this hearing, to the State Bar Association for review of your conduct, and regarding the funds transferred to Apex Home Solutions and the use of the revoked power of attorney, I am referring this file to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into fraud and embezzlement. Darlene sank into her chair. She didn't cry, She just stared at the table, her hands trembling uncontrollably. Furthermore, the judge continued, the will dated August 14th is admitted to probate as valid. The assets, totaling approximately $2,460,000, shall be distributed to Aurora Waverly in accordance with the decedent's wishes. It was over. The gavel came down with a dull thud that sounded like the closing of a heavy book. I stood up. I didn't feel a surge of triumph. I didn't feel the urge to cheer. I just felt a profound sense of relief, as if a tight band around my chest had finally snapped. We walked out of the courtroom. Darlene remained seated, staring at nothing, while Patrice frantically packed his briefcase and practically ran out the side door. In the hallway, Brianna was waiting. She wasn't sitting with Darlene. She was standing by the water fountain, looking small and scared. When she saw me, she hesitated, then walked over. "You won," she said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. "The truth won," I said. Brianna looked at her shoes. "Kyle is meeting with a lawyer today. We are going to try to cut a deal. We are going to pay back the $28,000. I wanted you to know that I am sorry, not for the money, but because I let her convince me that you were the enemy." I looked at my sister. I saw the fear in her eyes, the realization that her comfortable life was about to get very difficult. I didn't hate her, but I knew I couldn't trust her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "I appreciate that, Brianna," I said. "Good luck with the lawyer." I didn't offer to help. I didn't offer to bail them out. Grandma had drawn a line, and for the first time in my life, I was respecting it. I walked past her, toward the exit. Outside, the sun was blinding, the humidity had broken, and the air was crisp and cool. Jonah shook my hand on the steps of the courthouse. "You did good, Aurora," he said. "Most people would have taken the settlement. Most people don't have an Eleanor Hartley in their corner," I said. "I will handle the transition with the new administrator," Jonah said. "You don't have to talk to Darlene again. You don't have to step foot in that house again if you don't want to. The money will be wired to your account once the audit clears." "Thank you, Jonah," I said. I walked to my rental car. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, just watching the people walk by. I thought about the $2 million. It was a life-changing amount of money. It meant I could buy a house. I could retire early if I wanted to. But as I put the car in gear, I knew exactly what I was going to do with the first check. I was going to set up a grant in Grandma's name, the Eleanor Hartley Grant for Textile Arts and Female Entrepreneurs. I wanted her name to be associated with building things, not with the destruction Darlene had caused. My phone buzzed. I looked down. It was Darlene. I didn't read the text. I didn't need to know if she was begging, screaming, or blaming me. It didn't matter anymore. Her voice, which had dictated the terms of my reality for 36 years, was finally just noise. I pressed the block contact button. I looked at the empty passenger seat where Grandma's imaginary presence felt warm and approving. "You were right," I said aloud. "I didn't need their permission." I pulled out of the parking lot and drove toward the highway, leaving the courthouse, the house, and the ruins of the Waverly family in my rearview mirror. Grandma had left me a fortune. Yes, but the real inheritance wasn't the money in the bank. It was the realization that I could drive away and never look back. I was free. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while driving, cooking, or maybe winding down for the night? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to the Veronica Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach more people who need a little victory in their lives. See you in the next one.